Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports, a special edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And no game to talk about this week. I was kind of mulling over a few topics to consider to talk about for this week until the news broke that happened today. And it just goes to show that another 24-hour cycle, another spin around the sun. And there's always something to talk about in college football, specifically West Virginia football. And it's going to be a very busy time here during the month of December. And then, of course, as we get into January, and it's already on to 2024. So what's the news that you're thinking of them and talk about for today? Well, the athletic director, who I had previously said in one of my first videos of this 2023 season, I think is arguably, if not the most powerful person at West Virginia University, the athletics director, Wren Baker, went on West Virginia MetroNews with Hoppy Kercheval today and told Hoppy on record that Neal Brown will come back as the head coach of West Virginia for 2024. So, wow, okay. Why now? You probably be asking yourself. And that was the first question I was kind of asking myself. Why today? And I know that that Neal Brown had been on Hoppy's show a day or two beforehand, and Hoppy asked him that direct question, do you think you'll be back in 2024? So I think it was a mounting up of questions that, if you follow on social media, there is obviously a dichotomy between people who are for and against Neal Brown. You can sense it with everything that you put out on social media. You'll have people who are commenting on both sides, just like I've seen many of you on all of the videos that I've had for this upcoming this whole season. So I think it was the timing of it. The unknown in college sports is never a good thing. It's almost better to be in a place of bad, but you know what's going to be happening in the future and the steps that need to be taken to get to that place in the future, rather than the unknown, the hesitancy. We saw this with the collapse of the Pac-12 conference this past year, year and a half. Ever since the USC and UCLA decision, what's going to happen with the Pac-12? The uncertainty is people make rash decisions when things are completely unknown. So I think it was to settle that fact, settle assistants, settle current players, settle high school recruits. The early signing day is coming up here in just a couple of weeks. Like the line of secession in Game of Thrones, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, everybody gets consumed by it. So when you're the head coach of a college football program, it begins and ends with you. Some of these people are the highest paid public employees in their states. So, that's how important it is for some people at some schools. So Neal Brown can't really necessarily avoid that. And I think it is probably being still used in negative recruiting by other schools out there. And, it's hot on the recruiting trail this year. So I'm sure that any kind of question that can be thrown the way, put in recruits' heads, 14 to 18-year-old kids, that Neal Brown's not going to be there next year. The West Virginia, or in AD Wren Baker specifically, wanted to get out ahead of it. And of course, obviously, the transfer portal opens Monday. So as I talked about on my video nearly 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, that over last week and into this week, as soon as that Baylor game ended, there were already, in the deal of Christian Stokes, a guy who was ready to hit the transfer portal rather quickly and already announced his intent to enter the portal before it even opens. And I know once Monday comes and the portal does officially open, it's the floodgates are going to open. So I know that there's going to be more names that are entered from this West Virginia program. So to, aid in the discussions, I'm sure behind closed doors that this was, addressed to the players in these discussions. So, and again, I don't know who's a part of those, dark room conversations. Is it player? Is it agent? Is it I can't imagine that Baker or Neal Brown are a part of those conversations, but are they talking through a third, is it Rasheed Marshall, the director of player personnel? Is it with Drew Fabianach, the new general manager of the team? Is it Stephen Ford of Country Roads Trust? Like, who all is in that room with the players that they want to retain through NIL deals? I think we'll never know. I'd love to know more about exactly how that business goes about. But so it's just something I think that the more it's talked about on social media, the more that it's just out in the public square rather than be addressed. Wren Baker went and crushed it. And so I think first he doubled down in talking about, and I want to have the direct quote for you here from Ear Sports and Mike Kazaza reporting this. So this is a direct quote from Wren Baker when Kazaza and I'm sure other media members followed up with Baker to talk about what he talked about with Hoppy Kirchvold today. So having had a year to watch that, and you guys see me, I'm immersed in it, and I probably spend maybe too much time sometimes here in the middle of it all, and seeing how the kids react and the coaches react to each other and how the culture is. I think beyond wins and losses were certainly a factor. I'm just really pleased the way the season progressed and the job the coaches and staff did, from like academic support to sports medicine to nutrition and all the different components. Ultimately, Coach Brown is responsible for pulling all that together, and I think he's done a really good job. And then Baker said his decision aligned with the thoughts of WVU President Gordon Gee and the university's board of directors. I want to make sure they're also in agreement, but I think everyone thinks we made a great step forward and made a lot of progress. It's something that we can build upon. So, my point, I think this is premature. I know I already kind of set the stage for you, talking about like why, the why I think Baker did that, and obviously he's pleased by the program that Neal Brown and co., it's not just him, have built over the course of the last 5 seasons of having academic support staff, nutrition, strength and conditioning. Like, yes, they've built a program. It's just then ultimately it's a results-based business. So why I think this is premature. First and foremost, West Virginia still has a bowl game to play, people, and the opponent and context within the outcome still means something to complete this season. I'm seeing a lot of reports today, and if you're following social media, you're seeing this, that West Virginia could potentially get slated to play in the good old Birmingham Bowl against Toledo, a G5 team, who, yes, is playing in a conference championship game, I think tomorrow, and could potentially finish 12-1, but against a G5 school. What does it say about West Virginia as a program in the context of national relevancy in college football if you're playing Toledo in the Birmingham Bowl? Now, I've said all along on Twitter, if you follow me, and I still want West Virginia to get this. I want to see West Virginia play Louisville in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Like, bring it on. NC State, that's fine. I don't necessarily like that the Guaranteed Rate Bowl is on like the Tuesday after Christmas, and it kicks off like 9 p.m. Eastern time, or like 10 o'clock Eastern time out in Arizona. But I want to play Maryland. I want to beat the Twerps in a rematch from 2021. But like Toledo and the Birmingham Bowl, if West Virginia were to potentially lose a bowl game versus a G5 opponent, or I'd say get blown out by a comparable P5 program, I think you could make a very strong argument that the program is stuck in neutral and it's time for a change. So, why now? I mean, or will Brown, or could potentially, I guess that's one way to politicianize this, is for Baker to say one thing and then do another, potentially at the end of the month. Now we can say that now that we're in December here, and double back on what he said on, I guess it's words, not actions necessarily at the end of the day. So I said this, like, I moved the goalposts after that game against Oklahoma with Cincinnati and Baylor, and West Virginia needed to get to 8 wins. So it had to get to those the two last wins, and West Virginia thankfully pulled it out. Thank you, Garrett Green and Jaheim White, on that last series to pull it out against Baylor. But the job is not finished. The job is not finished here with the unknown that's happening with this bowl game. If West Virginia plays a quality ranked opponent and plays them tooth and nail, hard fought to the very end, and comes up empty, I think you can stay with this decision. But if you're playing Toledo in the Birmingham Bowl, it's just like playing Marshall. It's, everything can, if you win, you are supposed to win. It depends upon style points. It's not necessarily just, winning the bowl game. You lose, it's everything. So I don't like the timing of this, of this statement made and the, this news that's come out, because I just think it's still premature. I think this season isn't complete. It's not in the books, and it's terrible timing. Terrible timing the way this works now in today's college, day and age, of these players and the transfer portal and early signing day, and you're trying to re-sign people with NIL dollars at the same time you're trying to keep your roster still intact for the season to then go play in a bowl game, and then you're already thinking about next year. It's just like, it's chaos. It really is chaos. It is not your dad's college football of old, where people and opt-outs and injuries. So it's crazy. It's really crazy. But I think it's time, it's timely to make this like a complete video, is there can be a defense of Neal Brown put together. And if this is the case, and it doesn't necessarily matter at the end of the day how this bowl game plays out, because West Virginia got to this point in the season, has the board of directors, has the presidents, now has the AD's vote of confidence, and it doesn't really matter what happens in this bowl game. It's then time, I feel like, that we can evaluate Neal Brown. And I think this is what everybody loves to talk about this, so I am going to weigh in on the hottest topic of West Virginia college football. And I don't know why it always necessarily comes down to this discussion, because there's so much more that goes into it than just a head coach. Yes, a head coach can make a huge difference for your program, and I get that. Truly, Alabama, I don't think would have the kind of dynasty that it's had for the last, 15 years if it's not for Nick Saban, or Dabo Swinney's impact on Clemson, or Kirby Smart's now impact on Georgia. Yes, or Urban Meyer at Ohio State. You can, if you have the right fit guy, then he can get the Jimmies and the Joes into the system, surround themselves with good assistant coaches. The only thing that's going to tear you down is scandal. If you can get those best players into your system and train them up and then get them into the NFL and win championships. So I'm not putting that, I'm not selling short how important your head coach, your program is, but again, the players play the games on the field. So if you hear me after games, yes, I talk about what happens on the field, and it falls more on the players sometimes, I feel like, than it does on the head coach. And I rip Neal Brown and I rip Jordan Leslie, on various times whenever it's warranted. But if you heard me in that Houston, the way the Houston game ended and the way the Oklahoma State game ended, I can't put all of the fault on Neal Brown. So to say that he gets all the credit in wins and that he gets all the credit in losses is unfair. And the same goes for building this program. But there are some things that can positively and negatively affect on him. And I'm going to talk about why you can defend Neal Brown as the head coach of West Virginia for 2024. I'm going to break it down in two ways. You got your objective and you got your subjective. And the way that people always love to argue these two sides is, the objective being the wins, the stats, the individual accolades, and the subjective being, what's been the improvement is always the golden term that people want to argue. How is this program improved under Neal Brown? Let me tell you. So, I'm going to stay consistent with the way that I have been since back in July. 7 wins in the regular season, or 8 wins total, was the unspoken goal. That seemed not unrealistic, but what at the same time is, the media expectations were absolute BS. West Virginia was not a 3-9 program, pretty clearly. Hasn't been for since 2001. Has never lost 9 games in a season. 2013 had a lot of ugly warts, and we don't need to go down that road since it was 10 years ago. But 7 wins or fewer weren't going to be enough this year. 7-6 record was not going to get you I think Neal Brown another year as the head coach of the program. So it's strictly going by being a results-based business. West Virginia achieved its goal of getting to 8 wins. When the nation and Big 12 media were projecting you to only get 3 in most cases and picked 14th to finish the season, to set an internal goal of saying you're going to reach 8, you're doubling the national expectations. So to move it even higher, that's where I think we're crossing the line of asking for too much. Now I'm obviously going to address the Houston game, but I know that's probably what's first and foremost coming to your end. But the Houston game, I'll get there, promise you. But still, West Virginia got there, got to 8 wins. So, and you cannot forget this. And how many programs right now, like Ohio State fans were already calling for Ryan Day's head for losing last week to Michigan. West Virginia won the backyard brawl, everybody. Won its rivalry game in front of a packed stadium. So you won that rivalry game, you got to 8 wins. Yes, Pitt was terrible this year. Absolutely. So to think that was in any way, shape, or form in comparison to beating Penn State, even though you lost that game, like winning Penn State would have meant so much more, I feel like, than beating Pitt. But we know deep down in our core and myself, we'll take that Pitt game win for this season and hold on to it. West Virginia finished the regular season with the most rushing yards per game at 234 per game than any other Power 5 team. That's insane. I didn't look into the history of this or look into the stats, but how many times in West Virginia's history has it finished as the nation's top rushing team? That's insane. I mean, to get over 200 yards per game, that was just great. Garrett Green, if you saw this week, was named the 8th highest rated quarterback according to Pro Football Focus this season. 8th in the country. How insane is that? 2 weeks in a row, he's won the Manning QB of the Week award nationally. And he's the nation's leader, or the Big 12 Conference's leader in big-time throws, as Jed Drenning has chronicled and the context in my last video of what necessarily that meant. And then, as I'd been following all year, he had more combined, Garrett Green we're talking about here, more combined all-purpose yards, passing and rushing and passing touchdowns, with a better touchdown-to-interception ratio than Geno Smith in his first year as starter. So what kind of company does that say about Garrett Green that he's in? West Virginia had 4 members on the All-Big 12 team this year. Zach Frazier, Beanie Bishop, Cole Taylor, Wyatt Milam, and 15 guys. I know it was a participation trophy in a way kind of list, an honorable mention at 15 guys, but 15 guys making the all honorable mention list with 4 on the first and second team. So those are all your objective accolades, individual statistics, and then of course the 8 wins that West Virginia's already at for the season. Now let's talk about the subjective, and I guess you could kind of say that this is objective too, at least my first point. What's something that Neal Brown's been criticized for constantly, by myself included, over the last 4 years? Penalties and clock management. And West Virginia got so much better this year at that, if you haven't noticed. They cut down on their penalties, I looked this up, by 20. 20 fewer penalties for a season for West Virginia, and they knocked down their yards per average penalty yardage. That's kind of a weird semantics way to say that. Cut that down by 9 fewer yards per season. So they cut down on the penalties. That was huge. And then, I can only really think, I feel like, on maybe one hand, were ones that were really, really consequential for the season. Whereas some teams, how bad penalties crushed you. So there's improvement there. And same with the clock management that came out of breaks, that came out of, strangely, kickoffs, or, for offense to start a series after a kickoff or out of a commercial break, this, that, and the other thing. West Virginia, I felt got so much better as a squad in its overall preparation and discipline and getting out onto the field and starting the play. Also, recruiting and retention. And this goes beyond the games. Look at this 2023 class. There's some guys in there that I counted already as a part of that indispensable list who could be big contributors in 2024. Jaheim White, Traylon Ray, Ben Cutter, Rodney Gallagher. And then what they did with their retention efforts, this past year, bringing back Green, bringing back Markeyall, bringing back C.J. Donaldson, bringing back Wyatt Milam, bringing back Zach Frazier, like and that's big kudos to Country Roads Trust and getting the collective up and rolling after the tumultuous 2022 and really 2021 season where West Virginia was decimated by the transfer portal. Finally got, its act together, compensating these players to keep them on the roster and keep them happy. So from the high school recruiting standpoint, and then let me talk about the transfer recruiting, because my good friends over at Mountaineer Sports Now on Sports Illustrated had a great article today that tracked all of the players who West Virginia lost in the transfer portal from last year's squad and what they did on this year's squad. And the three guys that I'd told you that I thought were the three really consequential losses in the transfer portal this past year, were Caden Prather, Jordan Jefferson, and Charles Woods. And I already tweeted this out today. I think West Virginia upgraded at cornerback over Charles Woods by getting Beanie Bishop. I think that was an upgrade there. I think I'm giving Beanie Bishop, and I'm grading this transfer class for this year an A+, as a get. 59 tackles, third on the team, 4 interceptions, the team leader, the nation's leader in passes defensed, which includes 20 pass breakups. So and the interception, so that's 24. The 2 interceptions that he had against UCF on the road basically saved the game in the win. I think he's the best cornerback that West Virginia's had since Rasul Douglas in 2016. So you upgraded there by getting Beanie Bishop over Charles Woods. Jordan Jefferson going to LSU and kind of being a rotational guy in there. I think West Virginia did a tremendous job with Mike Lockhart as well as for Torma Mulba. I got to give him credit. A guy that, like I was saying, wasn't all that big of an ad. You wanted to go get a Jeffrey Mba, who ended up going to Purdue. Looking at Mba's stats, 16 tackles, 2 for loss, 1 sack. So I'll eat my words on Mulba. Going out there, 22 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss in the year. Definitely came out hot in his first 2 games against Duquesne and Pitt with 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss combined. Just kind of being a guy who split 60-40 with Lockhart, but you put them together, and I think they definitely made up for the loss in Jefferson. So it wasn't a big hit there. Then the other guy I mentioned, Caden Prather. So I think this was a collective effort by this receiving corps this year. If I'm going to give a grade, I'm going to give a B grade to Devin Carter. I was really excited when he burst onto the scene in that Penn State game with 6 catches for 90 yards, had that 37-yard bomb reception from Garrett Green. When West Virginia went into its circle the wagons mode and Garrett Green was injured, Nico Markeyall starting, only having 3 catches for 51 yards in 3 games against Pitt, Texas Tech, and TCU. I think Carter really struggled, wanted to get more involved. This is the reason he came to West Virginia from NC State, was to get thrown the ball. Bounced back nicely in his next 5 games. Houston goes off 5 catches, 116 yards. He did well, had a touchdown against Oklahoma State, UCF, BYU, Oklahoma. Proved that he was West Virginia's number 1 guy for this season, but then over the last 2 kind of disappeared. Just 1 catch for 20 yards against Cincinnati and didn't accrue any stats, really didn't play much against Baylor. So I expected more, I would say, out of Devin Carter for this year. That's why I can't necessarily give him an A, but I also recognize that this offense changed with the emergence of Green as a runner, with Jaheim White breaking out over the back half of the season, and some guys really came on strong. Traylon Ray got more involved. Preston Fox finally became he was 3rd on the team in catches this year. So, how can you say that Fox wasn't a reliable target? Really stepped up this year. Cole Taylor, second team all conference this year with an A. I'm giving him an A grade. I think he really legitimized the tight end position in Neal Brown's offensive system. We only saw that 1 year of Trevon Wesco really burst on the scene, but he was predominantly used as a blocker, and a damn good one at that. So you got to go back to like 2010 when West Virginia had Tyler Urban at tight end, that West Virginia really utilized the tight end. So you had Taylor, you had Fox step up, you had Ray step up, and then Carter was still there. So by the aggregate, with everybody involved, it wasn't like the loss of Caden Prather was felt all that much. So West Virginia's done, I feel like, a very good job over this last cycle in the transfer portal. I mean, some other guys that I'm going to give A grades. Anthony Wilson at safety, second on the team in tackles with 71, 1 interception, 4 pass breakups. I told you over the summer that Anthony Wilson was going to come in there and start at safety over Lance Dixon, that he was just a lost cause. Anthony Wilson, everything that he showed at Georgia Southern, he was going to come out there, and he doesn't have the greatest ball skills because of his size. He's a little guy at just 5'9", but he's a thumper. He's a hitter. He's a force to be reckoned with over the middle with anyone that cuts across in front of him. So, and also really bucked the trend, I feel like, of Neal Brown's recruiting players from the transfer portal that almost like uses them like a JUCO level player, get into the system, kind of redshirt, get stronger, learn the offense, learn the system, be a part of practices. Boom, your second year, you're going to really contribute. Wilson, threw him out there against Penn State, and bam, he starts all the remainder of the rest of the year. Michael Hayes as well. Really impressed with him and his kicking. Of course, 14 for 17 with a long of 49 this season. Really bounced back well in those last couple of games against Cincinnati. And then Baylor missing the kick. Not Cincinnati. Baylor getting 2 kicks. Those 2 clutch kicks that he made in the rain against Texas Tech from over 40 yards, I'm still going to remember that. That was phenomenal. And they also had 19 touchbacks on the kickoff this year. Talked about Mulba, guy I could kind of put the two of them together, and I think these are guys where West Virginia doesn't necessarily need to be so aggressive in the transfer portal if it thinks that these guys if the coaching staff thinks as highly as I do about these guys, that you can use them without having to go out there and spend an arm and a leg at getting a pass rusher. And I'm talking about Tamia Derwaje and Tyron Bradley. I give both of these guys around a B-, and it's just because they didn't get as many opportunities. Derwaje wasn't coming in as like a every down starter. Same with Tyron Bradley. So pushing Bartlett, but Bartlett never did anything necessarily that was warranted of losing his position per se. So Bradley with 19 tackles, 4 for loss with 2 sacks. Derwaje, 19 tackles, 5 for loss with 3 sacks. And I think both of those guys can make an impact next year. And kind of a guy that I was talking about in the transfer portal that West Virginia whiffed on, Braden Fisk from Western Michigan, ended up choosing Florida State, redshirt defensive end. 34 tackles, 4.5 for loss, 3 sacks, and 3 QB hurries. Good year, but between Derwaje and Bradley, you get better production. So brought in both of those guys. Derwaje from Kentucky can't transfer, still has 3 more years of eligibility to use, and Bradley still has another year to use from Abilene Christian. So awesome job. Some guys I think did okay this year. E.J. Horton, Day Hawkins. I think Horton has the opportunity to blossom into another deep threat this year because of his speed. Just has to work on continuing to complete those catches. Had just 10 on the air for 201 yards and a touchdown. And then for Hawkins, I think he was more necessarily for a character development, leadership kind of guy. High motor, happy-go-lucky. So kind of like an older guy in the locker room to deal with some of the younger guys and go out there and just really necessarily push them. So I'm fine with him really seeding that potential to Derwaje. I kind of expected a little bit more out of Hawkins, to be honest with you, but at just 6 tackles, 2 for loss, had 1 sack and a pass breakup that game against Penn State. So didn't necessarily do too much on the stat sheet, but I think he elevated this crew across the defensive line as an entire unit. So, and then, we'll see if Keyshawn Cobb comes back. We'll see if Montre Miller comes back. We'll see if Jashawn Polk, who West Virginia really never got to see this year, other than just 1 game against Duquesne, if those guys will be coming back. I think Cobb definitely will, in getting injured in Game 2 against Duquesne. Miller, he's going to have to get a medical red shirt to play, I think, his 6th year. I think he could be West Virginia's number 2 corner. So, and then Polk, who knows? Who knows if the whole plan all along, because I know he was a preseason prediction as an all-conference returner, and then, never really ended up blossoming, never really ending up catching on. So, don't know about Polk, but we'll see for next year if he comes back. Same with Miller. So, and then the others, so again, West Virginia's done well in the transfer portal this past year for it just having few, huge splashes that, you see across social media that you think, West Virginia was just doing okay. I think it did better than okay. My criticism of Neal Brown being conservative to a fault, he definitely put that to bed this year. So lesson learned that West Virginia is not going to punt on 4th and an inch anymore against Pitt in a decisive game. And it's noted by this stat. West Virginia attempted the 4th most 4th down attempts in FBS this year at 34. So West Virginia is not settling for field goals. They're not punting, from 4th and a fingernail. They were 1 attempt behind Texas Tech, who is notorious for being the most aggressive team in college football. So the conservative Neal Brown to a fault, you can push that narrative out the door. West Virginia is being more attack mode from start to finish against every single opponent. And then I love this quote, or I was listening to the 3 guys before the game with Hoppy Kercheval, Tony Caridi, and Brad Howe, and they had Garrett Green on. I think it was yesterday. And I'm not going to get this phrasing exactly right, but that running backs coach Chad Scott calls Green a lion that lives in a zoo. So, and I think to a kudos in subjective grading for Neal Brown is he finally uncaged the beast that is Garrett Green at quarterback. Is going back to that lion in a zoo analogy, it's like, okay, if you put out a goat in a lion's exhibit, the lion's going to tear that goat to pieces, but he has to kind of work within the confines of the zoo, within the parameters and what he's able to operate. And that's exactly Garrett Green. I've called him a Mexican jumping bean, the way he scatters all over the place and his rushing ability and wanting to improvise. And I think that is what Neal Brown was afraid of through 2021 that then impacted 22, was he was afraid to let Garrett Green start or, do his thing. Be a playmaker, give him enough leash to go out there and make plays. Probably didn't think he had the maturity. He didn't think he had the, responsibility. And granted, again, got to go back to that Houston game and taking your helmet off. You can't do something like that. So little things that Garrett Green needed to prove, needed to do, that Neal Brown needed to trust him. It's a symbiotic thing between Garrett Green and his head coach and Neal Brown, and I think that's what it was. In 2021, even if Jarrett Deggy didn't have the talent, didn't have the skills, wasn't going to move that, scored that offense, only scored 25 points per game that season and looked terrible in some of its contests. I can think to Oklahoma State, and granted, the offensive line was still a mess at that point in time. And then Brown just not having the trust and going to JT Daniels in the transfer portal to bring him in for 2022. So I think we're finally past that. That's long in the past, and now Brown finally trusts Green. What that means for quarterbacks in this program moving forward while Brown is the head coach, that is to be seen. So we'll see what happens with Nico Marchiol. We'll see what happens with Khalil Wilkins and the other quarterbacks on the roster. So we'll see how that. The quarterbacks are so interesting, I feel like, toward a team and then a head coach's legacy. And Dana had his good quarterbacks. Dana didn't ever necessarily have his own high school recruit during his time, going from Geno Smith to Clint Trickett to Skylar Howards to Will Greer, it always had to come from the transfer portal or the lower levels, not necessarily a kid that he groomed out of high school. And that's a bad way to put that, groomed out of high school, but developed as a quarterback, and he's doing that finally with Garrett Green and trusting him. So I just laid it all out there in 25 minutes. The objective, the subjective, it's all there for Neal Brown, positively for 2024. So what does he need to do to convince fans like me, but even people who are less believers in the data and what I just all laid out for you in 25 minutes, and me, the guys who will never be Neal Brown fans, and I know quite a few of them and interact with them quite often on social media and this YouTube program. So what does Neal Brown need to do, I should say, to position himself best for next season? Between now and then, and we can probably talk about the spring. So I'll kind of lay it all out for you, things that are going to happen most as soon as possible, all the way. And first and foremost, it's retain that indispensable list that I gave you last week. Try and pull it up for you here from my notes from that video last week. I may not have it. I'm so sorry. I may not have it here in my notes. So I created kind of like an indispensable players list, I feel like, for recruiting. Yeah, I don't have it. So sorry, everybody. But, I can kind of think of it off the top of my head. I think Garrett Green, Nico Marchiol, Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, Wyatt Milam. Yes, I'll even say Brandon Yates, Tomas Remak, Jaquay Hubbard. Keep that line intact. Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher. On the defensive side of the ball, Sean Martin, Ben Cutter alongside Josiah Trotter and Trey Lathan, and then Aubrey Burks in the secondary. So keeping those guys into the fold for this upcoming year are of the most importance. Guys like Christian Stokes, God bless him, probably would have found his way into a backup role next season with Hershey McLaurin, Burks, and Anthony Wilson holding down those starting positions, in addition to what West Virginia might get out of the transfer portal at that safety position. So good luck to Christian Stokes, for wanting to leave this program and go find more playing time. But it's those other key guys that I'm telling you out there that West Virginia needs to hold, and then it can play with the roster any which way it wants out of the transfer portal for other positions. Win the bowl game. First, that's as easily said. Win the bowl game. Whether it's against Toledo in the Birmingham Bowl, or as I say, what I hope for is Louisville in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Whatever bowl game it is, West Virginia, just go out there and win it. If it's against a better or ranked opponent, play to a close loss. It will be an easier conversation had, I feel like. But you got to have a good showing. Got to put on a show in this bowl game, I feel like. And I think they're capable of doing so. Replenish the depth and through retention, and upgrade players in the transfer portal. And just a couple of positions that I'm looking at: corner. Now, first and foremost, I think cornerback. If Miller comes back at your number 2 corner, Jacoby Spells didn't play as much behind Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin this year as kind of the team's 3rd corner. I do not trust Andrew Wilson-Lamp as far as I could throw him. So you're down to a whole bunch of guys who didn't play at all this year, and Jacoby Spells and Montre Miller, who is needing a medical red shirt from the NCAA to come back for his 6th or 7th season. So you got to go get some corners, maybe one or two. I think either at the center position or right tackle position, because the writing is on the wall for Zach Frazier to go off to the NFL. So if Brandon Yates is your starting center, then you need a right tackle for Doug Nestor. Or if you're going to put Yates back at right tackle, you need a center. I don't know if necessarily Landon Livingston's going to come in here and give you half to 3/4 of what Zach Frazier was going to give you at that center position. I don't know. Just my thoughts. Just my feelings, and yeah, I got a lot of them. So who on this offensive line is going to step up, or are you going to go find somebody in the transfer portal to upgrade on that line? And then on the interior defensive line, I always want beef. I would love for West Virginia to just have a complete full set of guys who are like 6'2" and bigger and 320 pounds or bigger. So get some guys on that defensive line to help out with Durge, to help out with Lockhart, Besterin, and Martin. So I always want some big guys on the defensive line to wreak havoc. I think that's only going to help. Zach Frazier and Beanie Bishop getting drafted. This narrative that I think will finally get put to rest this upcoming spring. Then West Virginia has 2 guys that go into the NFL draft. Gone are the days that West Virginia is not putting a guy into the NFL draft and to start making this a repetitive year after year kind of thing, that West Virginia puts guys into the league. That's only going to help in recruiting. That's only going to help in retention. All of these efforts, contending for conference championships, putting guys into the pros, and paying them with NIL money through Country Roads Trust. Those are the big 3 that are going to help this program be a conference contender year in and year out. I think this program needs another gem in this 2024 high school recruiting class. I know that a couple of guys, it's been West Virginia's decisions on a couple of the recent decommits. I think Jaquan Bostic and Keelan Flo being the 2 who have recently decommitted. West Virginia decision there to pull their scholarships. I know that's kind of like the unfortunate thing of college recruiting. So if West Virginia either wants to use those for transfer players, or if they can go out there and they can find another gem in this high school recruiting class. I see it's like West Virginia is not, according to Rivals, in the top 40 in the country, where West Virginia needs to be, I feel like, consistently. Because it does. Stars matter definitely to a certain extent. So you only have 1 4-star, and I can't think. I'd have to do the research, and I'm sorry I didn't for this day. That West Virginia has finished a recruiting cycle with only one 4-star or fewer. It's got to go back a while for that to happen. So can West Virginia go out there and go find one more high school gem for this recruiting class? I think making a decision on Jordan Leslie and the rest of the defensive staff, either from who's actually in those positions or an entire philosophy schematic change. And I think we'll know more depending upon how the way the bowl game plays out. If it's continuously that this offense, it's so funny how West Virginia can never pair a good offense with a good defense, it seems like, or vice versa, a good defense with a bad offense. If this offense is going out there and scoring its per game average or more, like it has over this back half of the season, doing extremely well and scoring the ball but can't stop a nosebleed, or they're letting a team like a Baylor or worse stay in contention for 4 quarters, I think that might be the most, right up there with retention and transfer recruiting, is what Neal Brown does with this defensive coordinator position and all the others on the defensive coaching staff for next season. I think I've laid that out well enough in my past video about recruiting and retention, that Baylor game recap. So go back and watch those about what I had to say about West Virginia's 4-2-5 scheme that really isn't a 4-2-5 scheme, and the bandit position that's just kind of a rover that does absolutely nothing. That's not a criticism against Jarrett Bartlett at all. It's just the schematics of this defense. They're just sitting in zone coverage and being reactive, not proactive, being ball hawks in the secondary and getting pressure on the quarterback and into the backfield. Did it better this year, I think, because you had some guys who had experience within this system for a year or more. And there will be returners for next year. There will be a lot of returners for next year. But still, I just don't think that this scheme works well enough. So I'll stop there. If you feel the same way about me, leave a comment here on YouTube. And then similarly, I think one last thing, and I know this is futuristic, so we're talking about further than 2024, but everybody's always looking at recruiting. Everyone, if whether it's high school recruiting, transfer recruiting, doesn't matter. So if West Virginia can pull out a big fish or two out of this 2025 high school recruiting class early, and I know West Virginia does most of its recruiting, getting guys committed over the summer going into their senior years, but I don't think Texas isn't saying no to any sort of commits right now. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and those guys aren't Clemson. Those guys aren't saying no to current juniors, saying yes to their programs right now. Where you got a guy in Chris Henry's son. Yeah, Chris Henry's son, who's a current sophomore right now, already committing to Ohio State this past summer. So I think where West Virginia and specifically Neal Brown needs to change this narrative about high school recruiting and, are we attracting good enough top-notch or quality recruits, is to go out there and get some bigger, fish to fry. Penn State cannot continue to just dominate this entire Mid-Atlantic region. It's recruiting on the same level as Ohio, I feel like as Ohio State. Ohio State's always right there, 1, 2, 3 in the country, and then Penn State's right in that mix. They're dominating Maryland, they're dominating Virginia, they're truly dominating from Pittsburgh, from Scranton to Philadelphia. From Scranton to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh to Erie. Penn State's got this whole region, I feel, Pennsylvania, covered in blue. They're getting into Ohio. They're getting, they're just taking over. So West Virginia has to buck this trend. And I think a guy put West Virginia on his top 5 tonight, so plays well to this program for that I'm creating. Deshaun Burnett, 4-star, 6'3", 220-pound outside linebacker from Amani Christian School in Pittsburgh. Go get him. Go get him. You're going to need him, so go get him. You can't continue to let Penn State just dominate this entire recruiting space that you're in. So if West Virginia can go get a big fish or two out of the 2025 class before the summertime, but even during the summertime, I think that makes a statement. I think that proves something to the fans that West Virginia's got something here to sell. You're putting to rest already with Neal Brown's contract and his coaching status for this program. So go out there and sell that to some of these underclass high school recruits. Go out there and get them to visit, get them on campus, get them committed for your camps over the summer, and then build those connections. So I think this assistant coaching staff really needs to hit this recruiting class hard, because so far that this 2024 class, and we can talk about it come signing day as well, seems like a lot of low floor, in NIL dollars type of recruits that are going to be needing redshirt years. There might be some guys who can truly break out. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that come signing day. But I think for the most part, there are a lot of guys on this roster who are just going to be there for depth, who are going to be there to redshirt this year and not necessarily contribute much in 2024. And it's okay to a certain extent, because I understand it. I've looked at the projections of this roster. I told you I keep that on my phone. There's going to be a lot of guys who are seniors next year on both sides of the ball, offense, defense. So you don't necessarily need necessarily a lot of incoming freshmen to come out there and start. So that's what I think that this coaching staff has done with this recruiting class. It's not have to spend too much in NIL dollars to get them to come here. And if they're comfortable with redshirting, getting stronger, getting faster, getting bigger, waiting behind the wings of some of these guys who are already slotted into starting positions for next year, then that's okay. But for this 25 recruiting class, go out there and hit more doubles, triples, and home runs, not so many singles as you did in 2024. I think that says it all. I've kind of laid it all out there. It was a premature move by Athletic Director Wren Baker to give a vote of confidence already for Neal Brown for 2024, but I let all the reasons out there on the table for why I think he did it, why now, and then really in defense what he's thinking, in addition to the quotes that he gave of why there's objective and subjective data to prove that Neal Brown should be the head coach in 2024. So I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your opinions. Leave your comments here on YouTube. Catch me on Twitter at Carson_Fox27. Yeah, we still got a lot to talk about. We'll talk about a bowl matchup, I'm sure, here in the next week. We'll talk about the transfer portal opening. It's never going to stop. And I hate to make some of these videos sometimes at the times that I do, because then something else happens 24 hours later and then changes the dynamics of what I talk about. So it's crazy. So, but I appreciate it. I love, coming on here and making these videos for you. So if you enjoy this video, please subscribe to my channel. Check out some of the other videos on my channel. You might like those as well. Give a like so other Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube and across other social media platforms. Got over 100 subscribers for this season, so I'm blessed. I'm thankful. I love hearing from you all, so leave your comments here on YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. So I'll be back next week to talk about more news within the West Virginia football program. Hail West Virginia, let's go.